Hilda was a character into which one girl was reborn. She had black hair and red eyes, as well as a slender, fit figure. She assumed that she fell asleep while continuously reading the book. And when she woke up, it turned out that she was some kind of extra character. She turned out to be a girl who did not appear on any page in the novel. However, when she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she also noticed that her body was quite attractive in appearance. The girl suggested that perhaps she was just an extra, and the probability of importance was unknown, and she was a simple girl without a family, but very wealthy without having a reason for it. When she found out how much money she had, she was very surprised, because she certainly didn't expect anything like this. Hilda knew that in novels such characters usually appeared in order to save someone, kill someone, or change the plot of the original story. However, she had no reason at all to appear, so she did not understand what such an extra character could do at all, and how she should now proceed. The unfounded wealth and status of an extra character were rather dubious, but Hilda suggested that in such a position she could be a fan of her beloved. It didn't matter at all what her status was. She believed that she could, and even wanted, to buy this status for herself. When Hilda got a little more comfortable in that world, she decided that she would definitely need to go to the ball, so she had to become a little higher in status. She came to one dealer a little bit, and as soon as he heard what she was talking about, he thought that she was just some kind of crazy person, and also hoped that she would leave sooner. But in the end, Hilda gave him a whole bag of money for his services. When the guy did everything, he gave her a piece of paper in which he raised her status. Thus, having bought herself a noble title, she nevertheless went to the ball. Only there she might have the opportunity to meet the man she needed. These lovely pink hair with a pearly sheen and shining eyes the color of either sea wave or green. It was the main character named Diana, where Hilda met her. As soon as she saw her, the girl immediately filled her heart. She even had the feeling as if she was breathing rays of light next to her. But it was just the perfect combination of golden eyes with dark hair, courageous, smart, the best in the world. And from birth, the man had the status of crown prince. This man was Helios, who was also the main character. This was the best choice for the writer to satisfy the mania for dark-haired, handsome men in the readers. When the girl came to the ball, she was in anticipation. She could not believe that she would actually be able to see her favorite characters in person and even up close. Then Hilda began to sincerely rejoice that she had moved into this body and got into the story of the novel. There was also a heartless character who sometimes made cruel decisions to achieve his goals. However, he was also the sweetest man in the world, with limited communication with the main character. His fate was one continuous misfortune. In the end, he had to be rejected by a woman and remain with an irresponsible love. However, the story of this misfortune suited him madly. This fair-haired guy was a very good, handsome, and truly courageous man who could never be found again, even if you searched throughout the entire universe. This was the second main character of this work, and his name was Carlos. But in fact, Carlos was Hilda's most favorite character in that world. She spent a lot of money just to see all these people at that ball. It was the place where these masterpieces were collected, the so-called art museum. And when Hilda found herself at that ball and saw the three of them, she decided that, gathered next to each other, they looked just like a real painting. The whole evening, the girl couldn't take her eyes off them. She thought that everyone around her thought the same thing. They especially liked Carlos. Hilda stood not far from some nobles, and then she heard the girl say that she definitely could not dare to greet him. There was an aura that she could never reach. Since the girl was reborn as an unimportant extra character, she certainly couldn't just come up and greet them. But still, Hilda was so happy just to see them up close that she didn't even feel too sorry about her helplessness. She was perfectly aware of the fact that whether she was superfluous in that world or not, it still moved as everything was planned without any problems. And Hild was already thinking about how she could benefit him. Because of this, the girl considered herself a little crazy. In fact, Diana was also a saint with divine healing powers, so she was a very important character. The self-discipline of the great god who always shows love on the side of the weak. She was the being who was called the only reliable one in the empire, where all kinds of greed and deceit were rampant. Naturally, Helios, the future husband and crown prince, as well as his best friend, Marquis Carlos, had to fall in love with Diana. That was the plot of this story. Helios smiled and said that she was always right. So he said that they were supposed to be together, and Carlos tried to assure her that they would always be together. Of course, not everything was so simple and delightful in this novel. There was also an evil character in it. In this case, the villain was Duke Orcus, who was the head of the aristocratic sect, and his daughter, Duchess Regina. With a family power that even the emperor feared, she had ambitions to marry Helios and become empress. For Diana, a commoner, the crown prince's favor was merely a thorn in her side. Once at one of the events, Regina pushed the main character and said that she definitely shouldn't think that such a low-class simpleton like her could be suitable for the future ruler of the empire. The woman also said that if they did not want the new principality of Duke Orcus, then the man would have to accept the engagement more deliciously. The authority of the imperial family is mercilessly shaken by the breath of the nobility. The crown prince, having abandoned his beloved, entered into an unwanted marriage. And in the end, the second main character, Carlos, without hesitation, took revenge for his friend and beloved woman. He forced the villains to drink poisonous tea using bribery and the Duke's sins as a pretext. After this, according to the plot of the story, the Trinity lived happily and for a long time. However, this did not last long. At one point, Diana suddenly started yelling at Carlos, not understanding how he could do such a thing. She found out about his crime and was very unhappy with his decision. The girl burst into tears and said that he had very cruelly decided to correct this situation, and she was very unhappy with his methods, because she certainly could not have expected such a thing from a man. Carlos wanted to ask her for forgiveness and explain everything, but the girl did not let him speak. She said that she did not want to hear his excuses. He had no right to them. She was in despair and said that all this time she trusted him, but he went and betrayed her, trampling this trust. So Diana wanted him to never show himself to her again after that. After this incident, Diana eventually turned away from Carlos forever, and they never had a close relationship again. That's why Helios and Diana got married. And everyone around blessed their marriage. They believed that the guy and the girl were just the perfect couple made for each other. A whole year has passed since Hilda got into that romance, and now, finally, having gone through all these events together with the heroes, she finally waited for that very ending. She was at the wedding with the rest of the residents and thought that, as an extra character, she had not done anything special and was simply waiting for the end. This made her a little sad, but she thought that at least this way she could return to her world and live her old life. As she watched Hillis and Diana ride in their wedding carriage, she also noticed how happy they were together. Even though the main characters were happy with each other, she also hoped that Carlos would be happy somewhere behind the scenes, because the story never told what happened to him after that incident. She herself was also upset, just like on that day when she first read the entire novel in one go and cried all night thinking about her poor Carlos, who was ultimately left completely alone and abandoned. She believed that the man was incredibly smart, so he should not get hung up on fleeting love, but live in the city and remove all the pain from his heart that filled it. The girl looked around and noticed that Carlos had not come to this ceremony, but she so wanted to see his face for the last time, and this made her feel a little sad. But in the end, it was time for her to return, and the man she loved with all her heart would forever live inside this story. She definitely wanted him to be happy. She really prayed for it, and a year later she met her beloved. He was standing on the threshold of death, and this, of course, broke her heart into pieces. When Hannah returned to her estate after the final scene of the story and was about to go to bed, she thought that this world had finally come to its end. She also realized the fact that if she returned to reality, she would not be able to even dream of a rich, unemployed life, as it was in this world. But she will finally be able to see her family and friends. She even became interested in whether people will believe her when she returns, because she has been gone for quite a long time. Hilda had actually missed them incredibly much during all this time. However, her entire enthusiastic mood changed rather quickly. And this happened because she was not ultimately returned to the original world as soon as she woke up. The next day, she noticed that she was still inside the novel. The girl assumed that too little time had passed. She was sure that she would return there when she woke up the next day. Before going to bed, she asked very strongly for this to happen. But from that moment on, Weeks and even months passed, and ultimately, she couldn't get out of this novel for a year. Every time she fell asleep, she hoped that she would wake up in her own world. But unfortunately, this didn't happen. Every day when she woke up, she became even sadder. I don't understand why she can't go back. The end of the novel has already happened, so this made her very wary. All of Hilda's wealth was donated to charity, so after the ending, she was left to live in the mountain house completely alone. The fear of living her whole life in complete solitude, a stranger in this world, where there was no family, no friends, no acquaintances, filled the girl's head. Because of this, it became more and more difficult for her mentally each time. She imagined a foggy future that she could not influence, and all this tormented her. What tormented her most was the fact that the newspapers began to write more and more often that Carlos had made another unsuccessful suicide attempt. When the girl saw this news in the newspapers, she felt incredibly hurt. He lost the will to live, and also because of the shock of being abandoned by the most beloved person in that world. The best friend and the woman he loved turned their backs on her for the entire year after the ending. He still kept trying to die, but luckily he couldn't. Hilda, counting the news, understood perfectly well that he was probably constantly stopped and somehow saved. Accordingly, this fact calmed her down a little. She really hoped that soon he would feel better, that he would let go of this situation and become happy. When Hilda saw how desperate he was, she began to pray in the evenings for his well-being. She truly loved this character with all her heart and did not want him to suffer like that. She also prayed that she would be able to see her native ceiling when she woke up, and that she would then have a book in her hands that tells how Carlos had a happy life. But in reality, in the end, reality only mocked her, and all her prayers turned out to be completely useless because it never happened. And then one day, the girl decided to go out into the forest. Since she couldn't get out of this story, she began to wear only dark clothes, and she always had strong bags and fatigue under her eyes. Hilda still couldn't understand why she was suffering so much. If she couldn't return, she wanted to at least be shown her best friend, who lived happily ever after. She absolutely could not understand why she continued to be in that world, why she had to endure such trials. The girl even thought that if everything continued like this, and the teachings did not end there, then she would simply like to disappear from this world in principle. She was so desperate that she fell in the middle of the forest and burst into loud tears. But at that moment, she suddenly heard the crack of a stick under someone's foot behind her, and the girl immediately became very scared. She quickly turned back to see who it was, and then she saw a blond, purple-eyed man right in front of her. This person was Carlos, and at some point, Hilda even thought that it was just a dream. She couldn't believe that it could be true. The man who saw the girl in such a state looked at her for a while, and after that, he simply decided to turn around and leave. But the girl immediately screamed and asked him to stop. Carlos, with an indignant expression on his face, turned to her and asked what she wanted in a very rude voice. When the girl looked at him even more closely, I realized that this really was her favorite character, and all this was not a dream. Then her mood improved dramatically. Then Carlos suddenly heard some screams behind him that indicated that he was being searched for. The man understood that he had to act quickly in order to save himself. Therefore, he approached the girl and grabbed her by the mouth, moving her closer to himself so that she would not make any sounds under any circumstances. At that very moment, the butler and the knights began to run past them. He said that they should immediately find Carlos and save him. They were all very worried because they did not understand where he could have disappeared to so quickly. The knights continued to run from side to side and shout his name, while the man and the girl hid behind a nearby tree in the hope that they would not be noticed. Hilda at the same time began to worry a lot. She did not understand how she was supposed to understand all this. Her favorite character pressed her to him. It was difficult for her to even believe that all this was actually happening. Some time passed from that moment. The voices finally died down, and Carlos began to let her go with a sigh of relief. He also said that they left. The girl, who started coughing loudly because she could hardly breathe, moved away from him. Carlos noticed this. He asked her for forgiveness. He explained that he was a little worried and therefore squeezed her mouth tightly. But Hilda immediately said that everything was fine, so he didn't have to apologize, and she thought that she could actually stand in his arms all day. Then she asked who was looking for him there so vigorously, and also asked if she could help him in any way, since she was worried about him. The man actually didn't refuse. He decided to hide with her for a while, so Hilda brought him to her hut in the forest, which was located not far from the place where they met. As soon as they went inside, this girl immediately said that the house was still a bit neglected because she lived there alone, but guests were very rare since the road to it was confusing. Carlos, walking inside, asked the girl for forgiveness for causing her so much trouble, but Hilda, laughing nervously, replied that he didn't have to worry, but on the contrary, felt at home. She thought that if she had known earlier that he would want to come in with her, she would have definitely left, at least because of this. She felt a little awkward in front of the man. While he was walking around the house and examining the territory, Hilda kept trying to figure out if this was really a dream, and all because even when she was rich, she only looked at Carlos from afar. And now, he was right in her house and sitting on her chair. For her, this seemed like something unthinkable. She thought that she ended up getting much more than she had when she was a rich fan. The girl came closer to him and decided to ask him a few questions. She asked him what he was doing all alone in the middle of the forest. The man immediately became wary. He looked at her with a rather stern gaze, but did not answer for some time. Hilda didn't want to scare him away from her, so she quickly said that if he didn't want to talk about it, then he certainly didn't have to tell her anything. But to her great surprise, Carlos said that he was doing in the forest, and the reason he was there was because he wanted to disappear from this world. After that, he added that she had lived alone in the forest all this time, so he thought that she had something to say. The girl, who was very surprised by his sincere confession, said nothing for some time. In fact, Carlos's words touched something in her, and she also experienced it. Sighing heavily, the girl said that without any reason she could not return to her friends and family in her home country. She thought that she would succeed, but now, after so much time of trying, she realized that even this hope had faded. Therefore, sighing heavily, the girl said that they were indeed a little similar, because both now saw no point in their existence. Carlos agreed with her and said that he had been abandoned by a friend and a person dear to him, and he too could not return to his normal life. Then Henta understood why Carlos came into the forest and hid from those people. As soon as she realized this, goosebumps ran through her. She couldn't believe that he really wanted to do this. The man suddenly clenched his fist and said that, although death would be better than such a life, he was not free to choose even that, and this made him very angry. She immediately shouted at him and told him not to do this. She believed that, even when it was so hard and difficult, it was definitely not worth thinking about death, because you could always find a way out and a positive in any situation. Hilda said that she actually didn't even consider the options of death. Of course, she was very sad, but she didn't want to shorten her life. Carlos, hearing these words, suddenly laughed and said that in that case the girl was stronger than him, after which there was an awkward silence between them. Hilda understood that her beloved Carlos, who she liked so much, cold and gentle, strong and kind, was now even sadder. Now that she saw him up close, she realized that he looked simply awful, completely emaciated, and it looked like he hadn't changed his clothes for several days. She doubted that he had eaten anything at all. Even though he was a minor character, he still shone brighter for her than before. So she fell in love with this character even more than before. So Hilda realized again that she was starting to get bored, and suddenly an idea came to her mind. So she asked him to stay there for a while, and she would return to him. The man was a little surprised, but did not object. He continued to sit in one place, waiting for her to return to him. Hilda thus ran out into the street and went to the village that was nearby. She believed that she might have been locked in this novel for a whole year for this moment. The girl really believed that she was left there for Carlos's sake, so that she could return his will and love for life. She was going to start with a hot and tasty lunch for him, and then cover him with a warm blanket and make sure he got a good night's sleep. You see, in his attempts to shorten his life, he probably didn't follow a routine. Then she would like to walk with him in a beautiful place and talk a lot. Even though they were not the main characters, Hilda believed that they could take care of each other and thus save lives. So she believed that they could live together to support each other. But when Hilda returned home, she saw a simply horrific picture in front of her. A man was lying on the ground, covered in blood, and next to him was the knife with which he had done this terrible thing. Hilda dropped all her purchases on the ground. She was shocked. The girl could not believe that he really did this. For a while, the girl just stood and looked at all this. After that, with slow steps, she began to come closer, and with a trembling voice pronounced his name. She turned him over to face her, and noticed that his body was already lifeless. Hilda could not contain her emotions. She burst into tears, and still could not believe that this had happened. She thought that she now knew why she had appeared and stayed in this world. However, now she was mistaken in her judgments. She didn't understand why she had to go through such agony and suffering. For some time, Hilda just held his lifeless body and cried. Finally, on the table after some time, she noticed a note from Carlos. He apologized for dirtying her house while dying and promised compensation for everything. This note also had his signature on it, and Carlos's death eventually became the main news in the newspapers the next day. However, it was only for one day. Even the death of the Marquis was quickly forgotten due to the scandal between Diana and Helios. When Hilda learned about the disagreements between the Crown Prince and His Majesty, she was very surprised. She did not understand in which direction the empire was heading and what was happening around it. The girls were now not at all cheerful. Their love had cooled so quickly. Although it had lasted more than 2 years, she did not understand how this could have happened, because their feelings were sincere. With each passing day, Hilda's sadness grew. She still could not believe that Carlos had done this. Ultimately, after his death, her life became completely empty. She was constantly angry. She now had a life without hope and regrets. She did not have the strength to even take care of her health. She didn't worry about her soul either. The girl walked around this world like her ghost. She was not interested in anything around her. She felt nothing inside. People had already started whispering behind her back. They knew that she came to the temple every day and simply wandered around the area. They also thought that it would be best for her to talk to the Holy Father. Perhaps he could help her in this situation. When Hilda entered the temple, she knew the fact that the guy had not been there since he became the Crown Prince. Status was certainly status, because he certainly wouldn't want to meet such simple people who visited that place like they did. Rumors were spreading around at an incredible speed. People had already begun to say that Diana's powers had run out, and Helios had abandoned the faith and the church. All this time, Hilda never stopped thinking about her beloved Carlos, who was the meaning of life for her. She believed that now this world did not exist for her because he was not in it. He died all alone from his own heats, and from this it became more and more painful for her each time. Then Hilda, having fallen in the temple, suddenly looked to the side and saw the sculpture. She thought that he had suffered incredibly much, so it was not surprising that he simply took it and surrendered and committed suicide. She believed that it was they who tortured Carlos. His death was at the hands of Helios and Diana. At that moment, the girl thought that if God existed in this world, then she would want at least some justice from him. The girl believed that if Carlos was destined to die abandoned like this, if there was a reason for her life in this world, then she would even be ready to give her life just to save her beloved. And at that moment, her wish came true. The girl's eyes suddenly darkened and she lost consciousness, and a minute later, opening her eyes, she found herself in a completely different place. Hilda felt how warm and soft it was. She looked at the ceiling and noticed that it was quite familiar. It took her some time to remember where she could see a similar interior. Eventually, the girl realized that she had ended up in her character's room before moving to the mountains. Hilda began to remember what happened and realized the fact that she was in the temple. So she assumed that after her prayer, one of the saints transferred her to this place. Hilda didn't understand at all what had happened. After all, if they hadn't known who she was, they wouldn't have done this. And even if they had known, they would have definitely transferred her to the mountain house. She was truly confused. She did not understand at all what was happening to her. She suddenly raised her hand sharply and did not feel any pain. Then she decided to test her body and stood on her feet and realized that nothing hurt her. On the contrary, she began to feel much better, and the headache disappeared somewhere. Hilda was very surprised. She thought that she felt like she had returned to her character's previous healthy body. That is, she had moved into the past. The girl ran to the window and opened it to see what was happening outside, and as soon as she saw the flags and the street that was filled with people, she couldn't believe it. She knew this view from the window very well. After the wedding of Diana and Hel, there was a parade and a festival until late at night in their honor. And this meant that it was the wedding evening of these two heroes. Hilda could not believe that all this was really happening in truth. She assumed that she had somehow been reborn again, or that she had simply been sent back to the past, right at the end of the novel for some reason. She didn't understand why she was returned to this particular place. However, Hilda decided not to worry too much about this. After all, she didn't have time for this at all. This day was Diana and Hel's wedding, and also the day when Carlos was supposed to try to commit suicide for the first time. Therefore, the girl had to act very quickly. She changed her clothes and went out into the street and stopped one of the cabbies. She said that she should be taken immediately to the Marquis Carlos. The man was very surprised and asked why she needed it so suddenly. But the girl did not explain anything to him. She simply gave him the money she was going to pay for the trip, and the man immediately went ahead without any unnecessary questions. Hilda actually really hoped that she was somehow magically given another chance to save him, and that was why the girl was going to take advantage of it. She had no intention of reconciling the already married Diana with Carlson. If Hel, the main character, courted the woman with fiery passion, then Carlos gave her everything he had with the warmth of a summer breeze. And it was because of this that Diana never even thanked him, accepting all his gestures as they should. Several hours passed from that moment, and when it was already completely dark outside, Hilda finally reached the desired estate. When the knights saw her, they were very surprised and immediately asked who she was and where she was going. The girl actually just wanted to make sure that Carlos's devoted love for Diana would not be wasted. So she told the knights that she had a very important message for the Marquis. Well, the knight began to insist on his own and said that it was forbidden to let just anyone in to see the Marquis without permission. So it was best for her to just leave before they started using physical force. Hilda screamed loudly, shouting the name of Saint Diana and pointing somewhere in the opposite direction from the estate. The knights immediately believed that she was there, and the girl was able to take advantage of the situation and run into the estate. She mentally asked them for forgiveness and said that she would definitely try to deal with everything as quickly as possible. In fact, Diana had gotten a lot from Carlos, and the girl was going to make her realize that he had really done a lot for her and how cruel her accusations were now against him. So, with complete confidence, the girl went to the second floor and ran into the room of the Marquis, who by that time had already pointed a knife at his throat. When the girl saw him, she was very surprised. Carlo immediately looked at her with great hatred and asked why she suddenly came to him. Hilda, as soon as she saw the knife in his hands, was again very scared. She had memories from the last time when he killed himself. She realized that he was trying to do it again. She thought about what would be the best way for her to start all this. Hilda decided to act very seriously and quickly understood that she had to show her confidence. The girl quickly came closer to him and realized that what she wanted most of all was for Diana to regret breaking this wonderful man's heart. So when she found herself next to the Marquis, she pushed him in the shoulder so that he fell and dropped the sword from his hands. Carlos was very surprised. Rubbing the back of his head, which he hit, he asked the girl what she was doing and what right she had to do that. But Hilda did not keep him waiting for long. She gave her name and said that she would like to become his Marquise. The girl believed that she had done absolutely everything in her power for the sake of her abandoned lover, even if it meant saying goodbye to her personal life. When Carlos heard about this, he remained silent for a while because he was very surprised. But in fact, this man also had a butler named Uros, who took care of the man after the previous Marquis. He replaced his parents and was loyal as a subordinate who respected his master since he became the head of the family. Although his master was rejected by those he trusted and the Marquis was unable to fulfill his duties as a butler, he firmly believed that his master would be able to quickly overcome this failure and become his former self. But in the end, the room turned out to be an absolute mess. The gentleman wanted to kill himself, and in broad daylight, some girl burst in and proposed. All these events greatly overloaded his mind, and he simply stopped thinking normally because he did not understand how this could happen in just a short period of time. She was very serious about it. She really was going to do it because she thought it was the right thing to do in her place. However, she still had one but, namely, that Carlos had nothing else left to do, and she could not allow him to die again according to the plot. At that moment, the man who was thinking about the girl's proposal was silent all this time. But after he realized the words that she said, he asked again if she was really serious. She immediately said that she didn't mean it that way. She felt a little ashamed, because she didn't understand what his reaction was, positive or not. But then suddenly, the Marquis laughed loudly. She did not understand whether he was laughing or crying, because he covered his face with his hands, and all this was very strange and tense. When Hilda turned to him and asked if everything was okay, Carlos said that these were already trifles. He asked if, in her opinion, he really looked so frivolous. The girl immediately screamed and said that this was not true at all. That was all she wanted to do was save him. But the Marquis didn't even intend to listen to her. He only told her to do as she wanted. He didn't care about anything at all. When Hilda heard about this, she was very surprised and immediately asked if he really said that, because she thought that he would start to refuse in every possible way. Carla finally got up from the floor and said that she wanted to become a Marquise. That's exactly what she told him about it, and accordingly, he told her to do as she saw fit. The girl did not understand at all. Could it really be that simple? She understood perfectly well that she had also suggested the first thing, but no matter how bad it was for him, we were not talking about something mediocre, but about a real wedding. Hilda wanted to tell him something already. However, he just turned around and, leaving, said that she could discuss everything she needed with the butler. He was no longer going to interfere in all this. As soon as Uros heard about this, he was very indignant. He did not share the gentleman's opinion at all, and would like to explain the whole situation to him as it was. However, the gentleman simply threw them out of the room, saying that they should deal with all the issues together, but he would like to rest a little alone. The butler also took the knife from the room, so that the gentleman would not do anything else to himself. They themselves sat on the floor for some time, looking at each other, and did not know at all what to do. Hilda herself did not understand that this had happened at all, and how she could now communicate with this person. The butler, meanwhile, turned to the knights and told them to carefully guard the peace, because their master had gone on vacation, and he also asked them to be more vigilant and check on him more often. After this, the Euros took the girl into the room in order to discuss all the necessary questions with her normally. Hilda Sev, standing opposite him, introduced herself and also said that she was the daughter of Lord Ely. The girl thought that she finally once again found use for her purchased status as the Baron's adopted daughter. The butler also introduced himself and stated his position, but Hilda already knew this information in advance. The man said that he was a little confused and still did not fully understand the situation. He also said that he really hoped that she would understand if he asked her a few not very polite questions in order to clarify all the details for himself. The girl, of course, did not object, because she herself was very impolite by nature. First of all, you turned to Lady Hildy and said that she invaded the apartment of her own free will, ignoring the security, and burst right into his room. After that, she took him and beat him down, and as a result, the Marquis fell. And on top of that, she stunned everyone with such a statement about what exactly she wanted from him. Hilda thought that these were not questions at all, but some kind of rude hints that she had acted completely wrongly, although the girl understood this perfectly well. However, Uros suddenly stood up and bowed, and said that if she had not interfered in all this, then their Marquis would have already left this world, so he was sincerely grateful to her for being so unceremonious. When the girl heard these words of gratitude, she was a little shocked, because in fact she had not thought about it, but it was true. In the previous version, where she did not appear, Carlos for some reason did not die in this mansion, so she assumed that it was the butler who tried the most to prevent his death. She assumed that this time she simply showed up before he entered the butler's room. So she decided that, on the contrary, it was she who should thank him for all the previous times. Well, after a short silence, he said that there was something else very strange that he wanted to talk about. He said that she told the Marquise right from the doorway that she needed to say something and ran straight to his room as if she had somehow already known in advance that he was dying. Hilda actually couldn't say that all this happened because she knew. But even if she told that she was reborn and then returned in time, then of course the butler would just laugh at her and take her for crazy. Therefore, she was in great confusion, not understanding how she should explain the situation at all. At that moment, there were many different thoughts in her head. She thought that, of course, superpowers were a common thing in science fiction novels. And besides, she had already interfered in Carlos's life and was now not at all an unnecessary character. Her thoughts were really very loud, and so the girl realized the fact that from that moment on, she became an important character in this story, and therefore she had to act differently. So Hilda came up with an idea of how she could answer the butler's question, and with confidence in her voice, the girl said that she could see the future, and for this reason she did so. Uros, having heard about this, was very shocked. For some time he simply looked at the girl in surprise. And after that, laughing nervously, he said that everything was clear to him. Of course, Hilda understood that he did not believe her, so she decided to try to prove to him what she said. The girl mentioned the pink diamond that the Marquis had recently given to the butler. This was to present the gift to Saint Diana. However, she knew that the man was never able to hand it over, so it lay on the third drawer of the Marquis's office. Uros, having heard about this, was very shocked. He already asked how she knew this, but the girl interrupted him and continued. She proudly raised her head up and said that the fact is that she knew a secret that only the two of them knew about, and she thought that this was quite enough for her to prove her abilities to him. Hilda thought that if he still didn't believe her, then she would never be able to tell him, because she had been in such a romance, but still couldn't be sure. In the end, Hilda, seeing the doubts on the butler's face, said that the Marquis would continue to go crazy. She wanted to use her abilities to save his life. The girl explained that she could see the future, and that this would definitely help prevent the Marquis' fatal mistake. So the butler just had to trust her for the sake of their own happiness. She said that in order to not let the Marquis die, she must stay close to him, and she needs the appropriate powers, which she herself simply could not obtain. Hilda said with confidence in her voice that this was the only reason why she wanted to become his Marquise. She had no other personal interests at all. She also told Uros that if he asked her for a receipt, she was ready to write it. She never intended to become the mistress of this house, because she had no right to do so. Of course, it was all a meaningless story, but that was all Hilda could tell him at that moment. Therefore, summing up, she told the butler that he could criticize her for taking advantage of the condition of the Marquis, who was not entirely healthy mentally and even physically, but she would definitely never do anything that could harm his life, and she didn't know how she could prove it, so the butler could just believe it. Of course, seeing the doubts on his face, Hilda understood that all her arguments were not convincing enough, but she would not be able to answer if he simply threw her out. Uros was silent for a while. He thought about all this, and then said that in fact it was not he who decided such matters, so it would be best for her to talk personally with the Marquis tomorrow when he calmed down. When she heard this, she was quite happy, because this option already suited her. She believed that it was all worth the shame that she had to live through. After they had discussed some more details, the butler bowed and said that it was already too late for the lady to return home, so she could spend the night in that room. He also said that they would see everything the next morning, when he would accompany her to the Marquis. Hilda, with a smile on her face, thanked him and said that it was valuable to her. After the butler closed the doors, Hilda felt incredibly tired. However, she had already come a long way, so she couldn't just stay. She believed that before she went to the Marquis, she needed to think over the plan carefully, but under any circumstances, she was ready to save him. The man who was in his room at that moment was confused. He did not know what was the best thing to do in this whole situation. Having burst into tears, he mentally turned to his beloved Diana and really wanted her to tell him. However, he understood perfectly well that this would not happen. When evening came, the girl did all her bathing procedures, and at that moment she finally realized that she was truly proud of her action. Even though she acted truly insanely recklessly, she was still happy that she did it, because otherwise she would not have had the result that she now had. Hilda then realized the fact that she was still inside the novel, so she had to do as she saw fit. Of course, it was strange for her to realize the fact that now she had to marry this man, but she still wasn't going to become his wife right away. She wanted to start with someone like a secretary for Carlos, so all this was still not certain. When Hilda saw him standing on the threshold of death, she realized that the secretary would not be enough. Accordingly, she made such a reckless decision and said all these words without thinking. Hilda had to pretend to be a seer. But if thanks to this she could really save Carlos, then Hilda didn't see anything bad in it. But on the contrary, she was even happy about it. And all because this was her main, only goal in this whole world. Then suddenly, some silhouettes and voices appeared in front of the girl. They said that since she had decided so, they would always be at her service. At first, she thanked them for their help, but then she realized that she didn't even understand who they were talking about and who we were. Immediately after this question, the girl opened her eyes and noticed that it was already morning. She sat up in bed and felt a slight headache. She stretched to loosen up her muscles a little and realized that she had had a really strange dream, so her mood for the whole day was rather chaotic. After Hilda changed her clothes, she found the butler. The first thing the man did when he saw her was greet her and ask if she liked sleeping in this place and if everything was comfortable for her. The girl thought that she felt so soft and cozy that she even had a dream. Although this happened quite rarely, so smiling, she thanked him and said that everything was wonderful. Uros went to accompany her to the Marquis' office and said that despite the fact that she said that she saw the future, however, she still calmly waited for his answer, which was rather strange to him. The girl nervously laughed and asked if she really looked like that, but she decided to quickly change the subject of the conversation so that no one would suspect her and asked how he felt this time. The butler said that fortunately today he was much calmer than yesterday, so he believed that this conversation should go well. Hilda breathed a sigh of relief. Then he suddenly turned to her and asked if she really had seen the future, but had not seen this moment for some reason. The girl tried to quickly come up with some excuse and said that she could only see big events, and small details were not very familiar to her. She informed him that she had indeed seen the future, so he should not question her gift. Uros was a little surprised by such a sharp reaction, but said that he was just joking. At that moment, she felt a very strong tension and realized that if he joked like that again, she would definitely not survive it. Hilda! She thought that probably many boundaries had disappeared, so their relationship little by little began to improve. At least he was more welcoming than last night. But Uros suddenly, passing on, said that in fact he was still not sure how to do it correctly, although it was impossible to deny the fact that she really saved the Marquis. The man believed that, under any circumstances, he would not be able to trust her completely, and he also said that the Marquis had told him something yesterday, so he had been preparing documents all night. At that moment, it became very awkward, because she could not even imagine that he had to work all night because of her, and she also felt very sorry. The butler said that she could look over these documents and talk to the Marquis. However, despite the fact that he was better than last night, she still had to choose her words carefully. Hilda smiled and said that everything would definitely be fine when they finished, and asked him to also bring them fruit borscht and brandy. In fact, she knew better than anyone how the Marquis was at that moment, so she definitely didn't need any additional warnings. Soon they finally reached the office. The butler knocked inside and said, "Mr. Marquis, Lady Hilda has arrived." But still, the girl believed that no matter how well she knew his feelings, she had to be very careful and always ready. When the Marquis allowed her to enter, the girl went inside and saw him sitting on a special sofa. He looked very tired and exhausted. When she saw him in such a state, the girl even stopped in place. For some reason, she couldn't take a step forward. She was ready in her opinion. However, when she saw that devastated look, that terrible memory came to mind when she came to her apartment and saw him dead. Because of this, Hilda felt very uneasy and awkward. However, with such flashbacks, she would definitely never be able to establish normal relationships in this life, so the girl was going to collect her thoughts. So she smiled and greeted the Marquis, wishing him good morning, her voice sounding quite loud. But after that, an awkward silence appeared between all three of them. No one knew what to say, and her loud voice made the situation even more complicated. At that moment, she was so worried that she couldn't even take a normal breath. The butler, seeing her excitement, immediately decided to take the situation into his own hands and showed her where it was best to go. The girl, meanwhile, tried to calm down. She understood that they themselves would thank her for all this later, so she had absolutely no need to be afraid. The man said that he had prepared 2 sets of documents so that they both had to read them and then discuss them, and he also handed them over so that they would be well acquainted with them. She took the papers in her hands and began to read them carefully. According to the documents, she was supposed to enjoy the rights of the status of a Marquis. If you are not independent, you can use the same level of authority as Carlos himself. As a married couple, the Marquis' property rights were very clear and understandable, although they were not drawn up on us. Also, all the necessary information was there, so Hilda didn't even worry about it. When she glanced at the butler and was pleasantly surprised, in fact, she knew that Uros was very competent, but she did not expect that everything would be so perfect. In the end, when she finished reading, she said that she had no rights to the Marquis' property or his money. She also explained that it was not a scam at all, but a fraudster who tried to steal the man's property. The butler, hearing this, said that he understood everything, and also that in that case he would remove this part since they were not against it. Carla had also finished reading and put the papers aside in the meantime. Then Urus turned to the butler and told the Marquis that if he was going to get married, he should have signed these papers. The man, without even listening to him to the end, picked up a pen and signed these papers. He was very serious in his decisions and was not going to back down from them. When they saw this, they were very surprised. Hilda immediately yelled at him and said that he didn't even have time to edit it after viewing it, and just recklessly signed this document. But the man threw these papers aside and said that he didn't care. He just wanted them to stop making noise and calm down. The butler immediately ran up to him and tried to talk to him calmly in order to explain to him all the risks of this situation, but the man did not listen to him. And Hilda, who at the same time felt very uncomfortable, noticed that he had that crazy look again, because of which she even felt a shiver run through her whole body. Therefore, without thinking twice, she stood up from her seat and turned to the Marquis, bowing. She said that she could promise that he would not regret it. Her intentions were indeed very sincere. However, Carlos, seeing her radiant smile, grimaced even more. He turned away from her and told her to just leave. After that, he again threw the girl out of his butler's room, remaining there alone. Once, having sighed heavily, he asked the lady for forgiveness and said that a little later he would try to talk to him again, and then perhaps he would find a common language. But the girl did not answer this. She only whispered that she needed to go to the temple. The butler heard this phrase and was very surprised. He asked why she needed to do this, but Hilda immediately headed towards the exit and said that she needed to return something to the Marquis, and she was going to start with Diana, thinking that then their communication could improve. Diana was a saint with divine power. However, because she was a commoner, her position in the temple was not as strong as it could have been. Carlos donated the most fertile land called Elion to the temples, and he did all this precisely for the sake of the girl, even though it was completely unprofitable for him. This was the story of Saint Diana, who, thanks to this, achieved a solid position, became the wife of the crown prince, and lived happily ever after. Hilda, who found out about all this, was simply furious. After all, when Carlos gave her the land for free, she still took it and left him. The girl understood that she couldn't stop it and was irritated just by the thought of all this. But Hilda was going to at least try to fix the situation. Finally, after she changed her clothes, she went to the temple, and soon she arrived there. The girl was going to tell Diana everything that Carlos had done for her, so that her neck would hurt from the weight of everything he had done, and so that her conscience would play when she realized that she had done wrong. As soon as the girl got out of the carriage and began heading towards the temple, one of the saints working there suddenly ran out to meet her. The man immediately said that he heard that the Marquis's carriage was in this place, so he came running. When Hilda heard about this, she immediately thought that perhaps he knew something about Carlos's concern for Diana, and that's why he reacted that way. The man who saw the sign on the carriage realized that it really belonged to the Marquis. However, he became interested in where he himself was, and why he arrived without warning at all, because this had never happened before. But Hilda immediately answered this man that today she was in place of the Marquis, so she greeted him by calling herself his wife. When the temple worker heard about this, his surprise knew no bounds. He certainly didn't expect to hear this, so he even coughed for a short time. Hilda, seeing such a violent reaction, she herself did not understand why he reacted like that. Because of this, the man began to push her away from himself. It was now even unpleasant for her to be near him. But the worker said that since she was already doing this, she should have at least pretended properly when she was lying. Everyone in the world knew perfectly well that the Marquis could not forget the diagnosis, so he definitely did not have a new wife. The girl was very outraged to hear all this. She thought that this man would not understand anything at all, so she was not even going to stop and explain anything to him. The temple worker himself was going to drive her away, saying that he did not understand how she ended up in the Marquis's carriage. But it would be best for her to stop this ridiculous lie. After this, the man saw that she simply ignored him and walked past. He immediately shouted at Hilda and asked where she was going. The girl didn't even turn around and explained that she wasn't going to talk to some idiot like him. She needed to meet someone higher up. The guy was already starting to get indignant. He asked what she was allowing herself to do and also wasn't going to allow her anything. But at that moment, a huge bag of money flew into his cheek. Hilda decided to use a proven method. So as soon as he saw this amount of gold coins, he immediately began to treat the girl more loyally. And at the same time, she said that she would like to meet the high priest. The man replied that he would of course be happy to show her everything around. After this, Hilda really did end up in his office. It was a tall man with dark hair. He smiled and said that he had been informed that the girl, for some reason, wanted to meet with him. But when she saw this man, she realized that this was not the Enlightenment at all. He was some kind of imposter. She didn't even try to hide her indignation and said that he was not at all who he claimed to be. He definitely wouldn't be able to convey her words to him properly. That's why she needed a meeting with exactly this kind of person. But the man replied that the first priest was very busy at that time, so it would not be so easy to arrange a meeting with him. He also had a high rank, so the girl could not worry and trust him. But Hilda looked at him with an icy gaze. She wasn't going to say a word to him unless he took her to the high priest. Her position was firm. But the man ignored this and asked if it was true that she had introduced herself to their clergy as the wife of the Marquis himself. Hilda, at the same time, assumed that he decided to test her in this way, so she said that she was perfectly aware of their suspicion. After all, they had just gotten married that day. So, in order to prove her case, she took out a paper which stated that they had indeed agreed to give the spouses from that day on. She said that if the man did not believe her, he could immediately send someone to the Marquis and check this information. However, she would not advise him to do this in order not to make him nervous once again. The man began to examine everything carefully and noticed that the signatures and seals looked really real, and since it was already like that, he still wanted to check it just in case. He handed the piece of paper to his assistant and told the girl that they would still check this information a little in order to be absolutely sure of it. As Hilda smiled in his face, she thought about how big an idiot he was and did not understand why he was so suspicious of everything. But while he sent his assistant to check the documents, he decided to talk to the Marquis and asked what had suddenly brought her to their temple. He also wanted to say something about the donation, but the girl interrupted him and said that she came to return the land, or he that was once given by the Marquis. As soon as the man heard this, he immediately became angry, stood up, hit the apostle with his hands, and asked, "How dare you?" He said that in this way she would definitely incur God's wrath by asking to return the gift given to God. He could not believe that she actually decided to do this. Hilda didn't pay attention to his screams, because she knew perfectly well that all this was a lie. They just decided to play on their status because the land was very good. So smiling calmly, she said that at that time the Marquis gave the land to the current wife of the crown prince. Glorified as a saint, it was not given by God himself. She also said that now, since the girl was no longer a saint in the temple, the earth was in this place without need, and therefore she believed that she had every right to take it. In fact, Hilda knew perfectly well that these people were blinded by greed, and they appropriated the temples, property, ideals. And then they were afraid of Carlos's wrath, and pretended to generously accept the girl back. In fact, at that moment, she considered herself simply invincible. After all, she was regressed. So, jokes with her were definitely not allowed. The man, who had begun to calm down a little, said that it was not his authority to talk about all this, so he asked the girl to wait a little longer. After that, he simply walked out the door to call another person and left Hilda alone. When she saw how fast he ran, she assumed that her words had worked after all. This could not help but make her happy. But if it hadn't worked, she would have had to threaten the image of Diana and the clergy. So she was happy that it didn't come to that, because she didn't want to defile her name already at the beginning of their acquaintance. But she also felt sorry that she couldn't tell the world about Diana's cold-bloodedness, because then everyone would sympathize with her. Crazy. After all, everyone believed in this saint. The girl was already thinking about when the man would finally return to stretch his back a little. She decided to enrich herself on the back of the chair, and when Hilda looked up, she saw an elderly man in front of her. She was very surprised. But this man spoke and asked for forgiveness for making her wait. When she saw this man, she immediately recognized him. After all, he was a real high priest. Of course, she was very happy, and the man said that they told him everything, so he would like to talk to the Marquis on his own now. The man put his hands on her shoulders and said that they had checked all the documents, and the Marquis's signature was real. So he also hoped that his children had not violated her personal boundaries and had behaved politely. After that, he walked past her and Sev, opposite her, immediately spoke up, asking if it was true that she wanted to return the land. Before that, Hilda thought that from afar, he looked completely different, and because of this, she was quite scared seeing him so close to her. In answer to his question, she said that this land belonged to the Marquis, so she thought that it would be very good to return it. The high priest laughed and said that he was very sorry that she had to go such a long way. However, they still could not return this land to her. Hilda heard about this and was very surprised. She could not believe that he would also want to keep her. But the man explained that Mr. Marquis knew that the earth, or he would not belong entirely to Diana. So she already belonged to their temple, and this is not without reason. She was very shocked to hear this information. However, she understood that she had to appear strong and confident. So she decided not to give up. She believed that she now had more privileges. After all, she was a Marquise, so Hilda was not going to back down. The girl said that since she couldn't do anything about it, it was okay. The high priest was happy and already thanked her for her understanding, but she interrupted his words and said that the cruelty of the saint, who admires the world, is a villain who used the Marquis to maintain his position, and the temple, who used him for its own benefit. She asked if anything terrible would happen if tomorrow the newspapers had exactly these headlines on the front page. At that moment she even laughed, considering that manipulating people was very pleasant. Hilda looked the high priest straight in the eyes and asked what he thought about all this. The man immediately became wary. He understood that things would not be resolved so easily with this girl. Then the high priest got out of the situation, laughed nervously, and told Madame Marquise that he did not understand at all what she was talking about. All this was, in his opinion, very strange. He also said that their clergy certainly could not have done such a thing. The temple does not do anything for its own benefit, and she certainly could have known this perfectly well. Therefore, her accusations were completely groundless. The girl at that moment was very surprised that he had the audacity to even smile in such a situation. He barely kept the smile on his face so that his eyes did not betray the hesitation he felt. But Hilda smiled and asked if it was true that he didn't like it. She noticed a fist that clenched and even began to shake a little from anger. The girl was going to wipe the smile off his impudent face, so she decided to move on to more serious arguments. Smiling, she said that she was the crown prince's faithful dog of the clergy. She exposed her duplicity by selfishly using pure blood and capturing the great land. She asked if he was happy with such a headline in the newspapers. Hilda, at that moment, was very proud of herself and her decisions. Without giving him time to tell him that, yes, she said that, in fact, if I even think about it, some aristocrats are still annoyed that the wife of the crown prince became a simpleton from the people. Many will definitely like this, The high priest heard this and understood perfectly well that these words were quite true and did not know how to act in such a situation, because unfortunately he had no counter-arguments. In fact, the saint had a lot of support from the people, but not all the aristocrats recognized her. If everyone finds out that the Holy Temple acted together, then this does not bode well at all. And so the man became a little wary. Therefore, he turned to the girl and said that it was unworthy for such a proud aristocrat to say such things, and therefore his behavior did not suit her a little. In fact, Hilda believed that he was probably so discouraged that they decided to threaten him, that he decided to even throw out such arguments. However, she was not one of the noble ones, so she didn't care. Besides, she was going to make as much noise as possible around their affairs for the sake of her beloved, so it was definitely impossible to stop her. Hilda continued the conversation and said that if he does not return the land, or he will immediately report this situation to the emperor himself. She will report that the temple was being stolen by firefighters and cared only about himself. The high priest, hearing these accusations, shouted loudly, slammed his hands on the table, and said that she had no evidence for this. The girl, of course, was not afraid of his emotions, so she giggled and asked if he was sure that she did not have this. They looked into each other's eyes for a while. Then the man suddenly asked her to wait for a while. He needed advice. Hilda, who understood perfectly well that the situation was on her side, said that he could even take his time and calmly make decisions. The girl thought that if she informed the emperor, there would be a strict inspection in the temple, and then other serious violations would be discovered. Besides, she had evidence, and they would definitely not hesitate. Of course, Hilda had no evidence that Haram had appropriated a lot, and could easily split on her own. And in such a situation, all she could do was bluff in order to finally get what she wanted. She was happy that in the end, using her brilliant plan, she was able to hook them. Judging by their reaction, she had done everything and was now just going to consolidate the result. When the high priest finished consulting with his saints, the girl suddenly stood up from her seat and said that she was very sorry that they did not understand her concerns. She gave them a chance to settle this matter quietly and peacefully. So I appealed to the highly respected high priest. She asked if he even understood what exactly she meant and what risks it entailed. The man was, of course, very angry because everything was going completely differently than he had planned. Then he turned to the Marquis and said that no matter how much he consulted, he still came to only one decision and voiced it to the girl. When Hilda finally returned to the estate that evening, she was immediately met by the butler, who had been very worried all this time. He ran up to the girl and asked what she was doing in the temple, since she had returned really late. She turned to the Uros and showed a guarantee of ownership of the land of 1,000,000, and said that this was exactly why she went to that place. As soon as Uras saw him, he was very amazed, and asked in a trembling voice, could it be that she somehow really managed to return their land back? His eyes were simply shining with joy, and the girl began to rejoice as he did, saying that she really managed to do it because she was also happy. They continued to rejoice and shout. Uros thanked her and said that she had done a truly incredible job, for which he was very grateful to her. Carlos, who at that moment was in his office and heard some strange screams from the street. He went to the window, and as soon as he saw the girl, he simply watched her for a while. After that, he turned around and left. Hilda then looked up and saw a silhouette leaving. In fact, she felt his gaze on her. At that moment, the butler approached the girl and asked if she would like to share this wonderful news. She was very surprised when she heard that the butler wanted her to do this, because she thought that it would be better for her not to meet the Marquis again in order not to irritate him. But Uro smiled happily and said that she had done all this, so he believed that it was she who should have told him such good news. Of course, Hilda would be very happy to see her favorite character, but she believed that she still shouldn't do this. She explained to the palace that he was not yet used to her. That's why she asked the butler to tell him himself. She thought that it would be much calmer for everyone. Uros, hearing this, immediately began to be touched, because he did not suspect that the girl would be so caring about the owner, but he accompanied her to the estate and told her to go to her place and rest a little. The man also said that he would send her a maid. She would definitely help. The girl smiled, thanked him, and said that it was very valuable to her. Some time passed since then, Hilda took a bath and changed into a nightgown. When she finally lay down on the soft high bed, she was able to relax. The girl didn't even notice how the whole day passed. With such a start, she would definitely be able to very quickly take revenge on everyone she needed, so she was going to continue in the same spirit. Tomorrow, first thing, she was going to check the condition of the returned land, in general, so Carlos should do it himself. However, she did not want him to worry about these things once again. And who else was it really not difficult for her to do this with these thoughts? Hilda fell asleep quite quickly, because she was very tired. This day was quite emotional for her. In fact, at that moment, she even forgot about all the bad moments for a little while, because of the joy of returning their Earth. In fact, this incident ended up having a butterfly effect that had a very negative impact on her. And all because that same evening, the priests went to the crown prince and reported this information to him, and he was very angry and said that they would not believe it until he saw it for himself. The butler also told Carlos this information, so the next day he called the girl to him and said that she had pulled off a rather interesting task. Hilda was very scared of his reaction, so sitting at a distance from him, in a trembling voice, she asked for forgiveness for acting without permission. In fact, yesterday she fell asleep, intending to inspect the land this morning. However, suddenly, when she was already getting ready, the butler came to her and said that the master had called her to him. He never looked at her, and so suddenly decided to call her into his office. Of course, Hilda could not help but be wary and was very worried. She suggested that he might not like it all, that she returned the land given to Diana, and for this, he might even kick her out. Of course, she was very worried because she still had so much to do, so it was definitely impossible to kick her out under any circumstances. Carlos called her name, and after she looked at the man, he couldn't take his eyes off her for a while. In fact, the girl even felt uncomfortable and became even more worried. After all, he was looking straight at her. This had never happened before, since during all previous conversations, he had mostly looked to the side. He continued his conversation and asked if it was true that she had not been an aristocrat before. Hilda realized that even at that moment, he began to look at the newspaper that she had bought for him, and she herself was very slowly answering his questions. After a short silence, the man finally turned to her again and asked her what he wanted, why she had decided to marry him and wanted it so badly. The girl didn't know what to answer him at first. She thought about her answer because she was afraid that it might be wrong and he would get angry. But in the end, she suddenly screamed and said that she simply hated the crown prince and his wife very much. One could really see strong anger in her eyes. Hilda was aware of the fact that stupid excuses would not work in this case, so she turned to him and said that she would like to talk to him honestly because she saw no point in lying. She looked at him and said that she wanted them to apologize to the man and wanted to help him stop thinking about death because he didn't need it at all. The man, alarmed, asked where Diana and Helios had already managed to cross her path, but the girl said that they had done absolutely nothing to her. She said that they crossed him, and she just wanted them to regret their choice, because it was extremely wrong and even unfair. She lowered her head and said that she came to this place and did these things only for this reason. Carlos watched her silently for a while. In fact, at that moment, he remembered the information that the butler had told him quite recently. With the daily morning newspaper, he also conveyed to the man the information that this girl could see the future. Hearing this, the man was very surprised and asked if it was time for the butler to retire, since he was talking nonsense. Uraz, in his defense, shouted loudly and said that he also did not believe it at first. However, Hilda knew in advance about his intention to commit suicide and saved him in time. In addition, the man explained that she knew about the pink diamond. He would have written down a refusal to transfer property in the marriage contract just in case, but he himself refused. And now she even returned the land and flax from the temple's possessions to him. He assumed that she really, for some reason, sincerely decided to take care of him. Carlos thought that he offered her to become a Marquis. However, she was not interested in either status or wealth, and she returned the earth on her own initiative. He found it hard to believe that all this was done just for him. So at their meeting, the man said that for him, all these actions were very strange, because they had never even met before. Hilda lowered her head and didn't know what to say, because he was, in fact, Absolutely right. A meeting before Rebirth certainly could not be considered, and he would not understand the concern of someone who had not known him at all before. So she found herself in a rather difficult position for herself. Carlos said that it was all very strange in his opinion, and also asked if there was any other reason why she decided to choose him. Of course, the woman knew that she simply had no choice but him, but she couldn't say so. Therefore, she could not come up with any excuses on her account, and Hilda asked directly whether he really didn't like what she did. If that was the case, then she was ready to simply sign the divorce agreement and leave his house. Hilda knew that no matter what she said, she would still consider herself a third wheel in all of this. If Carlos didn't like it, then she was ready to simply retreat and leave the situation as it was. The girl didn't see any other way out for herself. For some time the man was silent. Then he suddenly said that Helios had sent him a letter that morning. Upon hearing about this, she was very surprised and asked if he had already done this. The man said that these were her affairs, so he wanted her to finish them herself. He was not going to interfere in all this. He even said that in fact, he was even interested in how it would all end, so he allowed her to act as she saw fit. That is, he gave her the full right to choose. Hilda was very shocked when she heard about this. She could not believe that he essentially turned a blind eye to what she had done, and she really hoped that this would continue. And then she even thought that from love to hate, there was still one step. Fortunately, she could now breathe a sigh of relief. And smiling, Hilda said that since he had allowed her to do this, she would return when she met the Crown Prince. The only thing is that she needed his help to prove that she was not an imposter. The man explained that he would write the letter by hand, so that would be enough for Helios. The girl thanked him with a smile on her face and said that she didn't dare hope for more, so she was very happy. Then Carlos said that since they had finished talking, he asked her to leave. The man always did this very ignorantly and abruptly, so the girls would need some time to get used to it. After Hilda left his office, the creator immediately ran up to her, looking a little worried. When she asked what had happened, the man asked her not to take it personally. The master had simply not recovered yet. Therefore, it was best for her to be loyal to him. Hilda was very surprised by his reaction, because she hadn't even said anything yet. So she calmed Uros down and replied that everything was fine. She needed to go somewhere this time. But she was ready to swear that nothing like that had happened. The butler was a little surprised that she was getting ready to go somewhere early in the morning and asked where she was supposed to go. The girl smiled and replied that she was supposed to meet the Crown Prince. Uros didn't even doubt that this would happen. So already set for the best, he said that everything would be prepared for her departure. He shouted loudly to the servants and said that the lady was going to an audience with the hereditary principal. So they all had to prepare everything to the highest standard. As soon as the maids heard this, they were amazed and immediately ran up to the lady and said that they would certainly see the respected Lady Diana, so they would do everything at the highest level. They took the girl with arms and legs in order to transform her for the meeting with the Crown Prince. So Hilda simply had no choice. Moments, a few hours passed, and Hilda was finally ready. They put on a yellow corset and a beautiful purple dress with a white top. They also braided a beautiful hairstyle that perfectly showed her best features. Yes, the girl saw her reflection in the mirror and was very amazed. She thought that her character was really quite cute. However, now she has become a real beauty with all this makeup and jewelry. When the maids saw that she liked everything, they immediately rejoiced. They were happy that they managed to do it on time and at the highest level. In fact, Hilda was amazed by such care from the maids, because she quite suddenly became the Marquis's wife, and therefore such behavior was suspicious to her. At that moment, the maids began to praise the girl and give her various compliments. They said that she was even more beautiful than Diana, and wished her luck at the meeting with the Crown Prince. The girls were confident that she would succeed, so they supported her morally even more. However, as soon as Hilda heard these words, she was a little surprised because she knew that Diana was everyone's favorite in this novel. In the novel, this was exactly the psychology of all the people around her. However, when Hilda saw such a result in her direction, she was very happy that they really trusted her and was not going to let them down. She was also happy that everything turned out this way because she was going to meet the two most beautiful people in this world. so she needed to properly preen herself in order to be on par with them. So after talking a little more with her maids, Hilda said that it was time for her to run away. She was not going to lose for anything, so she decided to resolve this issue early. Several hours passed from that moment, and now she finally found herself in the estate of the Crown Prince. As soon as the girl saw Diana, she realized that she would probably lose after all. The girl, as soon as she saw her beauty, even got a little scared because of this. She started to tremble a little. She did not understand at all why she had such a reaction, but she decided to collect her thoughts, because she still needed to conduct negotiations. When she came up to their estate and saw the owners, she greeted them, bowed, and said her name so that they would know how to address her. Helios sounded quite angry and asked if she was the Marquis' wife. Diana herself was a little surprised when she heard this fact, but she turned to the girl and asked if it was by chance that they had never met before, since her face was quite familiar. Hilda, hearing this assumption, was very surprised at first. But in fact, she remembered very well how she saw Diana when she first came to this world. She was dressed simply, but quite elegantly. The girl smiled and healed people's wounds. She really was a saint for absolutely everyone. The main character was completely different from all the other characters, and Hilda absolutely did not understand how it was possible not to love her. Now, this saint changed into a luxurious dress and appeared only in luxurious places. She became a member of the imperial family and went everywhere only with her husband, the crown prince. This girl had long pink hair and beautiful blue eyes, and her husband was a tall black-haired man who did not approve of her paid help to people. Hilda, hearing her question, laughed nervously and said that she probably mistook her for someone else. After all, they definitely couldn't have crossed paths with her anywhere. But Diana continued to doubt. Because of this, the girl was not at all cheerful. She felt a little anxious about this. After the greeting was completed, the couple escorted Hilda to the living room and brought fresh tea and refreshments. Hilda immediately handed them the marriage documents and a personal letter from the Marquis, because he was well aware of the fact that no one could simply believe her. The girl also handed over these papers and said that he said that this would be enough for the crown prince. As soon as I saw this letter, he immediately said that it was his handwriting. His voice sounded very upset and even angry. But when Diana heard confirmation from her husband that it was indeed the Marquis, she immediately began to take the letter from him and asked him to show it to her. The girl read this letter and realized that it was all true. Then, in a quiet voice, she asked, "How could Carla have gotten married so quickly?" Helios himself thought about this question. He knew that Diana was right. Carlos was definitely not the kind of person who could laughably make such an important decision for his life. However, there was a marriage document and his personal letter. Moreover, the carriage that the lady arrived in really belonged to the Marquis. All these factors indicated that it was all true, but Haley found it especially difficult to believe it. He looked at Hilda and tried to accept the fact that Carlos had actually married this girl. Hilda herself continued to smile and tried to appear unperturbed, despite the fact that she was very worried about all of this. She realized that the man had realized everything and understood that it was true. She didn't even need confirmation of her assumptions because everything was visible on their faces. However, no matter how much they doubted this factor, she still remained a Marquise. But she also believed that they could feel free to doubt as much as they wanted, because no matter what they said, Hilda knew how to handle it. Then Helios spoke first. He told the girl that even if she was a Marquise, it was an abuse of power to steal land while threatening the temple. As soon as the girl heard this, she was very surprised, because there were no errors in her facts. So she became interested in which direction he decided to dig. That's why she remains calm. She asked what threats were being discussed. Hilda explained that she had received a proper answer to her logical explanations, but the man continued to insist on his own, and said that if such a logical explanation poses a threat to someone, then it is a threat. The girl explained that the land that was dedicated to Diana, while she was a saint, was transferred to the ownership of the temple. Therefore, it would be correct to say that this is extortion, using the position. As soon as Diana heard this, she was very shocked by the girl's harshness. She even stood up from her seat because she was under strong emotions. The girl said that the temple had no private property. Everything that was dedicated to the temple and the priests belonged to the gods. Hilda expected approximately this kind of answer, so she smiled and said that if this was really so, then in that case it was all even stranger. She asked if Her Majesty, the Crown Prince, did not use the amazing powers given to her by God only for the sake of the imperial family. When Diana heard this accusation against her, she realized that she couldn't even respond to it in any way, because it was all true. In fact, before the regression, being mortally ill, there was a time when Hilda ran to the temple and prayed to meet the saint at least once. However, she was kicked out of there and yelled at, because the saint no longer had time to deal with such non-entities as ordinary people who can't even pay. Hilda was on the verge of death, and only because she was simply rejected, due to the fact that she did not have the necessary status. Having become the wife of the Crown Prince, Diana no longer dealt with the common people, and the saint no longer belonged to the people, so the people had to save themselves. That is why the girl now asked her at a meeting whether it really corresponded to God's will to make such a decision to abandon ordinary people. Diana felt incredible shame in front of her. She understood perfectly well that she simply had no choice in this situation, but she certainly couldn't explain it. At that moment, the man blocked the girl's path, and, looking at Hilda with a very cruel voice, told her to watch her language and remember who she was talking to. Hilda then bowed and asked for forgiveness, and said that she had spoken. The girl decided that in such a situation, it would be best for her to simply start playing on pity. This should have worked, but she was not asking Helios, of course, so she turned to him directly and asked if he would really like Marquis Carlos to donate land to the temple. Diana, hearing this, was even more surprised. She asked what the girl was saying. She felt incredibly uncomfortable with this conversation. Hilda said that, to be honest, the Marquis donated the land to the Holy Land only because he had the most tender feelings for it. And she asked, maybe they want her husband to be bound by old love, and he could not refuse and forget Diana and move on. After the girl said this, she noticed how they both sat back down in their seats and even lowered their heads. She understood that they had nothing to say because she had spoken all facts. She even wondered if these two could argue. If she wanted Carlos to forget Diana forever, then she needed his past actions to become clear to everyone. So she was very happy that the conversation turned in this direction, because it was quite beneficial for her. The girl said that she is not offended by both of them because of her husband's past. It is only the past, and there is certainly a better future in his life. Hilda also said that they should understand that they work hard for this future, and when their path is blocked, they will not be able to move forward, and this makes them very tired. Diana, hearing these words, understood that her husband would be very angry. She already wanted to talk to him in order to resolve this situation, and for him to listen to her position in all of this. The man could no longer be stopped. He said that the girl had no manners of disrespect, so he did not understand how she was able to invade the Marquis's world. And besides, the wedding date was the day after theirs. It was very strange. We were suspicious, but Hilda was ready to defend herself. And then she said that there was absolutely nothing to be surprised about in this situation. She explained that the process of marriage for men and women was different because not everyone had to experience the fiery love that they both did in order to become a couple. Helios, hearing that she was going to teach them, became even more angry and asked why she thought she had the right to do this. The girl made an innocent expression and asked for forgiveness for explaining it all incorrectly, because she didn't think that he would perceive it all that way. He said that Carlos had many girls in love from noble families. That's why he was very interested in the reason why the man decided to choose her. She didn't like such rude treatment at all. She didn't understand. Was it really true that in his understanding, people were things, and how could one choose at all? But she decided to change the subject of the conversation. And smiling, Hilda said that she had completely forgotten to tell them something. Seeing their interested expressions, the girl said that, like Saint Diana, she also had one superpower, which was the ability to see the future. As soon as they heard this, they were very shocked. But Helios looked at her with even more disgust and asked if she really thought he would believe all this nonsense. Of course, she was well aware that he would not believe it so quickly, but seeing Diana's expression, she realized that the girl was a little shocked. Ada assumed that the girl firmly believed that she was the most special person in the world. However, Hilda could now calmly destroy this belief. She said that if he didn't believe her, she could easily predict the future so that he would be convinced of it. That same evening, in fact, the girl went back to the estate and met with Carls, retelling him the whole story. He was very interested in what she told them in order to convince. Hilda explained that she said that they would soon catch a major robber who was harassing the capital of the empire. The man asked if she really meant that same thief who stole only jewelry from the balalaikas. Hilda said that everything was exactly like that, but His Highness the Crown Prince still did not believe her information. He was angry until the very end of their meeting, and because of this, she felt a little uneasy. But the man interrupted the girl and asked how Diana reacted to this. He was very interested in what she said, especially about this prediction. Hilda explained that she had first asked for the temple land to be returned to this day. She had to clearly explain Carlos's intentions when he gave her the land in order to resolve the situation. That's why the girl said that she thought that everything was on business and that there shouldn't be any more problems. Carlos, hearing this information, became a little sad. In fact, he always became like that when Diana was mentioned. But he said that everything was clear to him. Hilda understood perfectly well that until now, he had rather strong feelings for her, and forgetting this girl was not as easy as it might seem. But after a short silence, the man suddenly spoke again and said that it was all very strange. The girl did not understand what exactly he meant and asked again. Carlos suddenly began to quickly approach her and said that he simply gave away this land and received it back, already having forgotten about it. It was surprisingly comforting. Therefore, looking the girl straight in the eyes and being only a few steps away from her, he thanked Hilda for everything she did. The man said that he would really like to express his gratitude because she had put a lot of effort into all of this. Hilda couldn't think of anything because he was too close to her. But as soon as she realized what exactly he said, she was even more surprised. The girl was initially grateful to life for the fact that she could see his face, so she didn't need anything more. Her beloved's face was right in front of her. She even wondered if this was a dream or reality. So for a while, Hilda was simply silent, trying to understand what to do in such a situation. She wondered if he would do anything to express this gratitude. As soon as her thoughts began to go into very intimate things, her face immediately turned red. As soon as the man saw her reaction, he was very surprised. He could not understand what she was imagining, because the expression on her face was very strange. He asked if she really wanted so many things that she couldn't even decide what exactly to ask him for. Hilda immediately said that this was not the case at all. She realized that she needed to collect her thoughts, because he wanted her to say what she wanted as a sign of gratitude. So it was the most inappropriate time to just look at her beloved. She then turned to the man and said that she did it for no reason, not really expecting anything from him. However, if he allows her, she would like to pester the tutor. As soon as Carlos heard about this, he was very surprised by such a request. He definitely did not expect to hear from her. He asked if she really had someone in mind, and Hilda immediately replied that she wanted to bring Madame Harmony from the salon as a tutor. The man, hearing this, immediately became wary. He even began to worry a little. And after that, he asked the girl if it was really necessary to take her as a tutor. But the girl replied that she needed exactly this woman. She didn't need anyone else. Hilda herself was very surprised. She did not understand why Carlos reacted so sharply to just a tutor. This was a very strange reaction for her. But in fact, the reaction was such only because Madame Harmony was the closest aristocrat to Lady Diana. After the two women who stood in the vanguard of the nobles and opposed Diana drank Carlos's poisonous tea and died, the nobles immediately changed their position. They no longer spoke out against Diana, but on the contrary, began to support this girl. However, this was not the whole story. Not everyone in this novel loved Diana so much and idolized her. Of course, there were still many nobles who continued to harbor discontent towards her. So Hilda thought that it would be a great opportunity for her to use them. But she felt a little strange because she wanted to hire a noblewoman who loved Diana and not hated her. It was a little illogical. But in fact, Hilda had everything thought out, because Madame Harmonia was the only noblewoman who treated Diana, a girl from the common people, favorably. She encouraged Diana not to give up on her love for Helios, and also taught Diana court etiquette, which was the foundation of the foundations. If the temple for Diana was a political ally, then Madame Harmony is her spiritual mentor. As a socialite, she couldn't pretend to be unaware of the whole situation, so Hilda was going to use it to her advantage. And Diana will certainly take measures to secure support for surrender in the near future. So Hilda must be the first to get Madame in Harmony on her side in order to have a strong ally for herself. For some time, Carlos looked at the girl and tried to understand what she had in mind. However, he was unable to do this, so he turned around and began to leave and told her to simply inform the Euros about this request. Hilda was immediately happy because it was really very important for her. She thanked him and began to leave. But the man suddenly stopped abruptly and said that he did not understand at all what exactly she had in mind. However, he was truly grateful to her when he said these words. He did not even turn to her so as not to show that he really felt it. He said thank you to Hilda again, and the girl was amazed when she heard this. She couldn't believe that he was sincerely grateful to her. When she returned to her room that evening, she could not be happier, because he also addressed her less formally than before. Her beloved looked at her and said that he was grateful to her. She thought that this is exactly what she had been waiting for all this time. This was a real hour of happiness. She felt that all her suffering, even such small ones, had already paid off. Thank you. She felt that things would definitely get better, and with these wonderful, joyful thoughts, Hilda fell asleep until the next day. The very next day, she asked Horace to contact Madame Harmony. In general, it would have been right to invite her to her house. However, she replied that the woman should come to her at a time convenient for her. When Hilda heard this, she was a little surprised because she did not expect this. Like Diana, Hilda went from being a commoner to a noblewoman, so she shouldn't give the impression of being arrogant. She had read this novel several times and had done well on all the character preferences, so she felt there was no reason for her not to win this round. However, as soon as Hilda went straight to Madame's house the next morning, she was no longer as confident as before. Hilda didn't expect at all that the girl would want to make an appointment so quickly. Because of this, she didn't prepare properly. But she still expected the best. She thought that she had had enough of the hour to take the bowl for the crayfish, so opening the door, she entered the Lady of Harmony salon. As soon as she went inside, a man who worked there approached her. He greeted the lady and said that he was ready to help her. When Hilda saw how everything around was shining, she was very pleasantly surprised and explained that she had an appointment with Madame. That was why she came. The man said that he understood everything and also asked what her name was. Hilda immediately gave her name, and the man asked her to wait for a while. He needed to warn the lady herself. At that moment, Hilda, looking at everyone present in the salon, was pleasantly surprised. She thought about how well the novel was made, that even the secondary characters were so beautiful and neat. However, all those glances that were riveted on her after she said her name made her very wary. She was really uncomfortable with the fact that they were watching, and after that, they even discussed something behind her back. Hilda thought that she had probably pronounced her title of Marquis too loudly, and even thought about the fact that perhaps everything that had happened in the temple was already known to everyone around. Because of this, she felt very awkward. She pulled her hat down lower so that no one would look at her. She thought that rumors were spreading too quickly and wanted to leave this place as quickly as possible because she felt extremely uncomfortable there. But at that moment, a young girl ran out to her. She was Madame Harmony, and when she saw the Marquise, she smiled and said that she really had come, which was a surprise to her. Hilda was very happy when she saw her. She thought that the girl had turned out to be her savior, and together with Madame, she began to walk away from all these terrible looks. Madame also said that they had prepared a treat, so she took her to the office. They sat opposite each other and started a conversation. Harmony said that she did not expect that the girl would actually decide to pay a personal visit. She thought that she would send a letter so that the woman would come herself. She explained that mostly high-born people invited her to their homes, but she still decided to try her luck and invited her herself, not expecting anything. But Hilda smiled and said that she simply had to come in person to express her serious intentions. The girl thought that the most compelling reason why Diana had attracted Madame was in particular Diana's modesty, and accordingly, Hilda believed that in this way she could also win her favor. Therefore, She was going to show the same qualities so that Madame Harmony would not think about her correctness. Then the girl suddenly even started to cry, so that Madame would feel sorry for her. She said that she really needed her help incredibly. As soon as Harmony saw tears in the Marquise's eyes, she was very worried and immediately ran up to her and asked what had happened. The woman really didn't expect that she would even cry here. She told Hilda that the girl could tell her everything and not worry. She would in no way judge her, but would only support her. The Marquise thanked her and said that she had no one else to ask for help, of course. This was an outright lie, but she simply had no choice. She had to do it. So when Harmony sat down next to Hilda, the girl, continuing to cry, told her story. She said that she was very much this Lord Ely. He had no natural children, so he adopted her to send her into high society. Due to her lowly origin, her place in the social world was only in a corner on the very outskirts. And now she suddenly had the great title of Marquise. But in fact, she lacked so many things to act correctly. Harmony, hearing this, immediately became emotional. She asked what Hilda wanted to say by this, and the girl explained that she thought that Lady could help her. At this moment, Madame Harmony became very uncomfortable. She certainly did not expect this, so they were silent for a while. In fact, Hilda had a special strategy that she chose to conquer Madame. It consisted of playing the role of a young simpleton who suddenly got lucky, but at the same time modest and sensible. Even if she fails to become Diana's equal, if she shows herself to be a compassionate person, then Madame will definitely want to help her. Therefore, Hilda was a little worried, of course. Because of all this, she sat and frantically looked at Madame, trying to understand what she would ultimately tell her. She noticed that Madame began to behave strangely. Her reaction was very unusual, and Hilda assumed that the woman for some reason even doubted all of this. However, this surprised her, because Madame Harmony was not at all such a character. She was one of those characters who are the first to extend a hand to the needy poor. The girl was even worried that maybe she had made a mistake somewhere, or that she simply didn't like him. So she decided to move their conversation a little in the right direction. Hilda turned to Madame and asked if her request was really a burden to her. The women, upon hearing this assumption, immediately said that this was not the case at all. Then, Hilda didn't understand anything at all, why she didn't say anything, but Harmony replied that she didn't know if she could ask her something. The girl immediately said that everything was fine and she could do it. Lady Harmony replied that she was simply a little puzzled by the fact that the Marquis had married her in the first place. Hilda certainly didn't expect to hear such a question. She looked at the lady, who was very embarrassed and was finally able to understand what had been tormenting her all this time. But Hilda thought that it was even for the best, because she had definitely become interesting to this girl, but she needed to completely attract her to her side. So it was impossible to give up. The girl said that in fact, she had admired the Marquis for a very long time. So Hilda was worried about the Marquis. He was heartbroken after the wedding ceremony of the Crown Prince with Diana. So that evening, she turned to him. She also said that the Marquis was devastated at the time, and that is probably why he agreed without even thinking. Having received this incredible service, the girl decided that it would be right to repay her properly. Now that Harmony heard about this, it became clear to her why the woman decided to visit the temple then. Hilda said that everything was exactly like this. Her husband gave away 4 of what belonged to him, and his generosity ultimately went unanswered. Harmony then said that everyone knew that the Marquis paid special attention to Lady Diana. Everyone was worried about the Marquis. However, this case changed. The girl, hearing this phrase, immediately thought about the fact that they had practically finished with this, so she could soon leave. Therefore, Hilda, turning to Madame, said that she knew her place very well and was not fit to hold a candle to Saint Diana. Of course, she was perfectly aware of this, even without this. However, the girl said that until Mr. Carlos regained his composure and gave her the divorce papers, she simply wanted to repay him for the service, because she felt that it was her duty. As soon as Harmony heard this, she immediately shouted at the lady and asked her not to say this under any circumstances, because it was all completely untrue. The girl said that she had already been able to prove her intentions by returning the lands, and she also took Hilda by the hand and said that she understood her perfectly and was therefore ready to make every effort to help her. The girl was very happy to hear this. She was really happy that she managed to get what she wanted. Hilda thought that this lady was a truly delightful character, and she was happy that she had remembered her at all. Then suddenly, the accordion said that everything would not go like this. It would immediately draw up a plan for her training so that the girl would not worry anymore. After this, Madame Harmony taught her in detail social etiquette, precautions, and fashion. She scrupulously and meticulously gave her everything she knew. At first, it was very difficult for Hilda to remember so much information. However, she knew that if rumors spread quickly, she would soon be invited everywhere, and it would even pay off greatly. The girl had to get the maximum education so as not to let down Carlos. So she was very attentive to her lessons and always completed all the tasks that Madame gave her. And so, when several days had passed since that moment, Hilda hired a maid, Clarissa. She came to the girl to bring her afternoon tea and told her the good news. The girl said that the robber was caught. Hilda, hearing this, did not even look up from her papers and said that this was very good. The maid said that he had been troubling the capital for several months and that he was caught this morning, and everyone in their village has been talking about it since the morning, and everyone is happy. Hilda, hearing that this had happened, was really happy. However, because she had a lot of homework, she couldn't even think about all of this normally. She assumed that Diana and Helios had probably heard about this much earlier. She really hoped that now they would finally stop doubting her. Of course, Hildy would really like to look at their faces now and find out who will laugh last, because she turned out to be right after all. And they were just rude. Clarissa noticed at the same time that the girl was in a rather good mood. This made her happy. Hilda thought that she had managed to get closer to Madame and had gotten used to the fact that she needed to do something and teach the thief was caught, so everything was going just perfectly as well. She decided to ask how the Marquis felt. Seeing the worried expression of the maid, she immediately asked if something had happened. But the girl said that it was not about that at all. He had a guest at the moment, so he was a little busy. When Hilda heard about this, she was very surprised and thought that he was not at all in a condition to receive anyone, and decided to ask if this was an important guest. The maid didn't answer this, but she thought that Carlos was definitely not the type to rush, and he definitely wouldn't accept just anyone in such a state. Then she suddenly had one guess about who it could be, and she turned to the maid and asked if it was true that the name of this guest was Hyperion. The maid, having heard about this, was very surprised and immediately asked the mistress how she could have found out about this, since no one knew. In fact, Hyperion was the name under which the crown prince sometimes hid, so Hilda knew that she had to act very quickly. "Insert your place!" She began to run away the crown prince. This is her opponent. So even Clarissa could not tell her, because of fears he came immediately after catching the thief for sure. However, if this was so, then Carlos should have called her. So the girl did not understand how the crown prince could even come to him in broad daylight. The girl was incredibly angry. She couldn't believe that he actually thought that she would take it calmly, so Hilda went straight to his office, where she saw the butler sitting at the door and eavesdropping. Seeing him, she immediately looked at the man with an angry look. The man realized that he had done something wrong and decided to talk to the girl. With a trembling voice, Ura said that he was just worried that something might go wrong. So he decided to sit by the door and listen, so that if something happened, he could quickly run in and help. Hilda thought that Urasu didn't need to apologize at all, because she understood him perfectly well and was not going to condemn him for it in any way. The girl sat down next to him and also began to eavesdrop in a whisper. She asked the butler if anything was happening inside at all. He replied that so far nothing had happened. They were just talking. Hilda replied that she was glad to hear it. And while they were sitting there for a while, they suddenly heard the sound of breaking glass. The girl was very scared. She quickly opened the door and ran inside shouting Carlos' name. She was terribly afraid for him. Then entering the room, the girl saw his bloody hand, which hit the glass. It broke and injured him. She saw the blood from his fist dripping onto the ground and was very scared of what could happen between them. Hilda quickly ran up to the man and asked if everything was okay with him, and the butler said that he would call a doctor and ran out of the room. The crown prince, meanwhile, looked at Carlos in surprise, but in fact it was clear that he had rather mixed emotions. The girl paid attention and saw Helios, and also thought that all this was only because of him, so she began to get even more angry at the man. She looked at him with an incredibly angry look and told him to leave immediately. Hilda was truly beside herself with rage. As soon as the crown prince heard this, he was a little surprised. He had never been spoken to in such a tone. He already wanted to answer something rude. However, he understood that it was better not to do this. He ended up looking at Carlos, who looked back at him with a bloody hand, and the man turned around and started to walk away, asking him for forgiveness. After this, Carlos suddenly could not stand on his feet. He fell to the ground and was in incredible pain. Hilda asked him to be patient for a little while longer, until the doctor comes and he feels better. The girl herself, meanwhile, was trying to understand why he continued to pretend that he didn't care, but his face gave him away perfectly. In the end, the man even lost consciousness because Hilda was nearby, and she managed to catch him so that he would not hit his head. Several hours passed from that moment. Evening had already come. The doctor was called. He examined the hand and bandaged it. The man was still lying unconscious in his room. Hilda was next to him at that moment and sat the whole time. The doctor said that fortunately the wound was not that deep. This certainly calmed her down. This happened in a fit of feeling. People could not restrain themselves. He advised them to rest, keep the peace, and then everything would be fine. It was also necessary to do bandages. So Hilda could not worry, there was nothing serious there. But the girl was still very sad. She was also very interested in what they were talking about, which made the man so angry. She accidentally said the last phrase out loud, and Carlos, who woke up and heard it, wondered if she was really curious. The Marquis, who did not expect him to wake up so quickly, was even scared. But then the man spoke to her again and asked if it was true that she knew that Heli would come that day. The girl replied that, unfortunately, she did not know this. Such details were beyond her control. The man replied that everything was clear to him. He himself turned away from the girl because he felt awkward about that situation. After a short silence, he said that in fact he did not want to take Heli, and if he could, he would prefer to avoid this person forever, because he was very unpleasant to him. In fact, when Helios came, he was very surprised when he saw Carlos. He asked what was wrong with the man and what was wrong with his condition. He wanted to ask what had happened to him since they last saw each other, but Carlos interrupted him and asked if he had been enjoying his honeymoon. The crown prince became angry and said that he had come to ask questions and asked if he had really married this strange woman. Carla asked him what business it was all about and mockingly asked if the guy really thought that only he was allowed to get married. But the man started shouting loudly at him and said that this was not like him at all. This girl was too suspicious, and he let her get so close to him. But Carlos didn't understand at all why he cared about all this. What was the point of being so cautious about life? Helios, hearing about this, was sincerely surprised, because in fact he loved his life and did not understand how one could act so recklessly, because it could seriously affect him. In fact, it was because of Carl's caution that he lost Diana, so he no longer saw the point in all this. He turned to Helios and decided to tell him the truth. The man told him that on the day he got married, he decided to just die. Of course, the prince certainly didn't expect to hear something like this, and didn't think that everything was so bad for Carlos. Yes! The man continued the conversation and said that this woman stopped him. She used her foresight and burst into his room. She wanted to get married. He agreed, and therefore this whole situation was not the work of Helios at all, so he would like to ask him not to interfere in their personal life anymore. After a short silence, the man turned to Carlos and asked, why, if it was so painful for him, he didn't tell about it earlier? Why did he remain silent all this time and suffer alone? Lowering his head, the prince said that they had been friends all this time, so he did not understand how Carlos could do this and just suffer alone. At that moment, the man sighed heavily, and a smile appeared on his face. In fact, he had expected something like this, because the prince always did it. It was he who was to blame in all situations. He fell in love, died, and ultimately suffered a terrible defeat. Of course, it was all his fault. Helios also said that he had never been like this before, and asked how it happened that he had changed so abruptly and radically. He also said that it would be incredibly painful for Diana to see him in such a state. He also said that she did not deserve it. Yes, it was very unpleasant for Carlos to hear all this. As soon as he heard about Diana, he got angry and asked if Helilas had really started talking about her. The man was glad that he smiled and said that everything was exactly like that. She was also very worried about him, so worried that she didn't even sleep all night long. The prince already wanted to say something else. He thought that this had a good effect on Carlos and could help him. But in the end, he was very wrong. Carlos only got even more angry. He told the guy to shut up and also asked how it happened that, since she was so worried that she didn't even send him a single letter. He started yelling at him and said that if he was going to continue talking all this nonsense, then it would be best for him to just leave and irritate him even more. Thus, he miscalculated his strength, and out of anger, he hit his hand right on the glass. Carlos told the whole situation, and where he said that of course it was all arrogant. He really wanted these two to be happy, and he would definitely calm down soon and forget about them. He just didn't want them to remind him of their happiness all the time. He also said that only when he was pushed to the edge of the cliff, he was able to look into his heart, and he simply could not bear it. That is why he decided to die. It was too painful for him. Carlos also said that he was disappointed that he had not unexpectedly survived, because he ultimately could not even die of his own free will. He always did what he was told, and here he was unable to do that either. Hilda certainly couldn't feel guilty about not letting him die. However, she felt a little ashamed that he actually thought that death would have been the best choice for him. But Carlos suddenly said that thanks to the girl, he was finally like this. Hilda immediately became interested. She looked up at him and asked what it was. Carla also looked at her and replied that from that moment on, he believed that the most important thing was to be honest with himself, and therefore he again thanked the girl for revealing this simple but important truth to him. Hilda felt like she was starting to cry from happiness and pride in herself. She immediately bowed before him and said that he didn't need to thank her at all. She just did what she thought was necessary. In fact, Carlos was the whole meaning of her life, so of course it was very pleasant and important for her to hear such words from him. She still resurrected for his sake, as she wanted. So the girl was going to continue to act in the same spirit so that ultimately he would soon feel much better. After the crown prince returned home and told Diana about the whole situation, she was very surprised. The girl said that this definitely could not happen. She could not believe that Carlos decided to commit suicide on their wedding day. For her, this was the biggest shock. But Helios said that this girl stopped him, after which she became a Marquis. So now, at least one thing became clear to them. Diana, having heard about this, immediately understood that apparently this girl really was a clairvoyant, since she had done so, but her husband still continued to doubt it, and said that it was difficult to say for sure. At first, he thought that he needed to find out what the true purpose of her wedding was, and only after that draw any conclusions. Diana, having thought about it, nevertheless agreed with the man and said that he was indeed right. She held the same opinion. On the day when Carlos opened his heart to Hilda, she again decided to live for him, because she considered it her duty and obligation. Well, in the end, the girls suddenly received an invitation to tea at Countess Irenaeus's. The girl immediately told her teacher about this. When the woman heard about this, she was very surprised. She did not expect it to happen so quickly. It was written there that the girl wanted to treat everyone and make new acquaintances. Harmony said that she knew perfectly well about the upcoming tea party, but did not think that they would really want to invite Hilda so quickly. Hilda actually had the same opinion. She hoped that she would have at least one more big event, after which she would have to go to such closed ceremonies. But her teacher suddenly smiled and said that in fact it was very similar to the girl's character, so it was quite obvious that she would have done the same. But Hilda then thought about who this Countess Ernest was. She remembered that she was an active person, not inferior in authority even to Madame Harmony. But she did not understand why, in that case, Madame was so worried about this invitation. The woman then turned to the Marquise and asked if she was ready to respond to this invitation. In fact, Hilda understood that she was probably invited simply out of interest when they heard that a woman they had never heard of had taken the title of Marquise and taken back the lands from the temple. The girl also realized the fact that if she makes even one mistake now, There will be a big scandal. However, she needs to know what the Countess thinks now, after she showed a neutral attitude towards Diana in the original. The problem was that this Countess was not like the Saints or Madame Harmony, and the biggest problem is, that's all that was known about this girl from the original. She was an active socialite, rather sarcastic and neutral towards Diana. Hilda did not know more information, and because of this, she was incredibly scared. The girl knew that she was an unimportant character, so she did not understand how she was supposed to cope with this person at all. The teacher, as soon as she noticed that the Marquise was a little upset, sympathized with her a little. She understood how worried Hilda was. After all, it wasn't just anyone but Countess Ernest, so she fully shared her excitement. At that time, Hilda even thought that perhaps the best thing for her to do in this situation would be to bribe her. At that moment, she had a lot of different questions in her head. For example, what topic for discussion would become the central one if she came as a girl? I would really like to refuse this because I thought that it was not for her at this stage of her life. Hilda was not aware of what she liked and what she did not accept, and was still only learning the manners of etiquette that were accepted in this country. However, she also knew that it was impossible to simply take and ignore her. That would be even worse on her part. So, in the end, after thinking about it, Hilda sighed heavily and told the teacher that nothing could be done. It was for Carla's sake, so she had to agree.